playing this Esper mid-range Hero Precinct 1 deck, and this is actually, I think, a pretty favorable matchup for Esper mid-range, but only if you build your deck with this specific matchup in mind.
Yeah, Hero Precinct 1 can be a liability against Shock, but your peripheral elements can make up those points a lot. 3 main deck copies of Oath of Kaya, that's likely to carry some weight here.
It looks like the draw from Carpenter is on a mold of 5. Not a really great start, just 1 land. Has a 1-drop creature on the second turn of the game and no second land. So this one could be over before it even begins.
Yeah, just chipping in with Fanatical Firebrand, and Dilks going to fire off a Thought Erasure here. Take a look at what Carpenter has left over. Wizard's Lightning, light up the stage. Chandra Fire Artisan, and Lightning Strike.
Now here's a question. With such a strong performance at the last Standard Open, this mono-red deck has basically been all over the place so far today. We had it on camera last round. Harlan Fear, your friend, putting up looks like a pretty weak showing in Zach Heaney. But this round, Brad Carpenter, he's playing mono-red again. Do you think that this is going to be a trend where just mono-red just kind of sticks around, or do you think maybe it won't have such a great weekend this weekend, and then by next week it's just gone? I
was curious. I think that this weekend is going to be a big determining factor. You see Dilks casting that Oath of Kaya. That's certainly preparation for the mono-red matchup. That's going to take down the Firebrand. Dilks up to 19. This kind of stuff, if this persists, I think you're going to see mono-red probably diminish a bit in popularity.
Yeah, obviously this is not the best showing of a mono-red deck. It's mold to 5. Brad Carpenter just a handful of burn spells, kind of hoping he's playing against a deck with creatures, a lot of creatures rather, and instead just playing against Esper mid-range. No creature played at all in the first 4 turns. Brad Carpenter just kind of sitting on his hands with Wizard's Lightning, Lightning Strike, and Chandra.
Yeah, Thought Erasure took his light up the stage way back on turn 2, and that was really the only castable for Carpenter at that time. Just left with some burn spells against an opponent with a lot of life. And the turn 4 play for Dilks was Sorin Vengeful Bloodlord. That's going to give all his creatures and planeswalkers lifelink on his turn. The Bloodlord just gets to hit something for a point, gain a little bit more life. Hostage Taker is going to grab this Vyushino Pyromancer. This one might already be wrapped up. Yeah, and the cool thing about this particular matchup is that Sorin plays a dual role of just returning these creatures over and over, kind of being a distraction for the red decks if they don't deal with it. It doesn't quite dominate the game as much as you think it would, but it is still very good. And here with a Hostage Taker, he can actually just kill off the Sorin if he so chooses to bring back Hostage Taker with a grip full, or with all of his mana untapped, and potentially steal that Vyushino Pyromancer from Brad Carpenter. Carpenter's going to try to make a show of it. He's now made his 3rd land drop. He used Lightning Strike to take care of the Hostage Taker. Pyromancer came back. That bumped the Sorin down to 4. We'll go back Dilks' way. Play a 6th land. It's Isolated Chapel. Going to tick the Sorin up.
Yeah, and with Brad Carpenter having a Wizard's Lightning at the ready and a Wizard on the battlefield, it would have been, I believe, a pretty poor play for him to minus the Sorin all the way down, getting back that Hostage Taker. So heads-up play, ticks up, drains for another point, and forces Brad Carpenter to just use more and more and more resources to take out this Planeswalker, and that just gives Matthew Dilks so much time.
Yeah, it was a combination of 2 Wizard's Lightning end up taking down the Sorin.
Yeah,
and now Carpenter is going to try to work on the life total and attack for 2, Dilks to 22.
Yeah, and he got the job done in killing the Sorin, but what did it take? 2 triggers from a Vyushino Pyromancer and 2 Wizard's Lightning. 8 damage was thrown at that Sorin, and it ticked up twice to gain 2 life.
No action for Dilks. Pyromancer connects again. Carpenter has made that 4th land drop. He's going to deploy that Chandra.
Yeah, Dilks is a little low on gas, but he has a Vraska's Contempt, which he was saving for that Chandra that he knew about. So he's going to go ahead and deploy that and bust it up. And now Dilks, though, he has a Hero Precinct 1 in hand, and now it'll just be whether or not he can find a multicolored card. Instead,
how about Liliana Dreadhorde General?
Instead, finds the literal unbeatable 6-mana Planeswalker, Liliana Dreadhorde General.
Yeah, that's going to go up to 7 loyalty immediately, make a zombie. Carpenter has a reasonable follow-up. Here's Experimental Frenzy. That's about the only card that can get you out of a spot like this.
Yeah, I spoke too soon. I say unbeatable. It's going to be really tough to beat, but if a card in Standard could do it, it's Experimental Frenzy.
It's like Teferi Time Raveler was picked up for Dilks, so now he's going to cast that Hero Precinct 1, follow that up with the Teferi, that'll get him his 1/1 token.
Yeah, he's going to get a 1/1 token, and he can bounce that Vibrational Pyromancer, which is effectively locked out of the game after that, thanks to that Experimental Frenzy. He can tick up again on the Liliana Dreadhorde General, but instead decides to bounce the Experimental Frenzy. I like this play from him.
Yeah, that buys him some time, will give him a little bit more time to plus that Chandra. Has pretty solid defenses. He's not really going to get attacked in a meaningful way by the Pyromancer.
Right.
And he's actually just going to shove with that first zombie token. Remember the static ability on the Liliana Dreadhorde General? If a creature you control dies, you just get to draw a card.
Right, and that's a pretty heads-up play from Dilks, and this speaks to what I was talking about last round against Harlan, where you have to figure out a point where you can start attacking, because if you give the red deck enough time, it can claw its way back into a game thanks to Experimental Frenzy, thanks to the reach of burn spells. And here, Matthew Dilks getting aggressive with that zombie token, but he also has plenty of other blockers, so it just makes good sense.
Carpenter just able to redeploy the Frenzy against Dilks' squad now of the Hero, 2 zombies, and a 1/1. Back over to Dilks. Draw for turn. He was empty-handed there. Draw was a Tyrant's Scorn. That'll take care of the Pyromancer. That'll make a 1/1 off the Hero. And an attack for 7. Carpenter had taken some chip shots already. This will bump him down to 8.
Yeah, he's at 8, and also that Liliana Dreadhorde General is threatening an ultimate next turn, which would leave him knocked down to 1 land, 1 creature, and 1 enchantment.
Carpenter will draw for turn. Sometimes you try to cast a burn spell in your upkeep. Can't do that against the Teferi Time Raveler, as that did go up on Dilks' turn.
Now it looks like Carpenter found a shock. He's going to knock off the Teferi, but that's, honestly, it's not going to get him out of this spot. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's really difficult to deal just 22 damage from nowhere.
Right. He's not looking to do it all in one turn. He's looking to effectively draw a bunch of burn spells to claw himself back into this game. The problem is every time he points a burn spell at a creature, Dilks is going to get to draw a card. And if he targets the Liliana Dreadhorde General, that's just more damage not being dealt to Dilks.
So he found a land, played that. The next card down is a shock. He's thinking about where he wants to aim it.
Yeah, if he doesn't target the Lily, he's losing all of his lands, which effectively invalidates Experimental Frenzy. But another brick on top decides to pack it in, as he should.
Yeah, Matthew Dilks is going to take down game number 1 here. And also has some pretty good cards in the sideboard when we get down to that. You can check that out using the Cardboard Live extension, and we'll be getting out on the screen shortly. And here they are. So let's see what Dilks has. He has 2 copies of the Elder Spell, 2 Dovin's Veto, 2 Basilica Bellhaunt, ding ding ding, 2 Narsat Parter of Vels, 2 Moment of Craving, 2 Cry of the Carnarium, an Ugin the Ineffable, a Duress, and a Vraska's Contempt.
Yeah, so that game was not really indicative of what Mono Red's capabilities are. Brad Carpenter missed a second line drop for multiple turns, didn't play a 1-drop, played a 1-drop on turn 2, and ultimately just gave Dilks too much time. We saw that when Brad Carpenter really started to get going, Dilks was at a healthy, like 23-ish life, with a couple of removal spells for the few cards that Brad Carpenter had left. Carpenter had to expunge all of his resources to deal with a Sorin, and ultimately left him with basically no gas at the end of the game when Dilks cast Liliana Dreadhorde General. So, while something like Dovin's Veto feels like it could be good because it knocks off some of the burn spells as well as the Planeswalker and Experimental Frenzy, counter spells often get locked in your hand against something in mono red aggro because you're forced to basically tap out in weird spots to kill creatures, because otherwise your life total is going to be in some serious jeopardy. So I don't really like Dovin's Veto. I don't really like the Elder Spell because it really only targets Chandra, and there's likely only a handful of those running around. What card I do like, Basilica Bellhaunt, hits on basically every front. Establish a board position, gain some life, and force your opponent to discard one of their likely few resources from their hand. Don't really like Narset. Mono Craving, a great card in this matchup. Cry of the Carnarium, pretty good in the matchup. I expect all those to come in. I do like Duress, even though I don't like counter spells, because it costs 1 mana and can be played at some random spot and usually take something worthwhile, as Red's better cards tend to be expensive non-creature spells like Chandra and Experimental Frenzy. But worst comes to worst, you duress them on one of the first few turns, strip them of one of those burn spells, and then you can maybe play Hero Precinct 1 and it doesn't die immediately.
Yeah, and over on Brad Carpenter's side, it looks like he's playing card for card what Harlan Fear was playing. We had him on earlier. Sideboard's 4 Lava Coil, 3 Tybalts, 3 Rekindling Phoenix, 2 Direfleet Daredevil, 2 Risk Factor, and an Experimental Frenzy. What's good here?
So I expect Carpenter to bring in Tybalt as just a way to prevent Dilks' life gain effects from really taking hold. Plus, generating a few bodies off of one card is good when your opponent's trying to 1-for-1 you to death with removal. With that said, I expect those tokens to get swept up pretty regularly against stuff like Cry of the Carnarian. Plus, a lot of these red decks do side in Legion Warboss, and so I would expect most decks with Cry of the Carnarian to be bringing it in, so it could be a little less useful than normal. I really like Direfleet Daredevil after sideboard, being able to hit a Thought Erasure, sometimes even a removal spell that can kill something like a Lear Dawnbringer that sometimes you see out of the sideboard. I like the versatility of it, and worst comes to worst, if you don't have another 2-drop, you just play a 2/1 first strike and it's going to get in a few chip damage. And it's also pretty good against all these tokens generated by Hero Precinct 1. I'm not really sure on the Rekindling Phoenix. Basically, you can't afford to have too many 4-drops in your deck. I think Frenzy and Chandra are significantly better. And after seeing at least one Vraska's Contempt, you can always assume that there's 3 or 4 after sideboard. I'm not sure that I love Rekindling Phoenix, but it is quite good if your opponent has a bunch of just generic spot removal. So.
And so that's going to be the sideboards for the players. You can see the main decks using the Cardboard Live extension. And if you want a place to play them, check out Star City Games Game Night every week in May, featuring exclusive Fur Queen and Country tokens and sleeves. That's a nice one. Big fan of that.
I just love, well, apparently the Corgi also has some significance with the Queen as well. I know that I think Ross told me that the Queen actually has a bunch of Corgis, so it makes even more sense why it's a Corgi. So
it is a regal breed.
Yes, definitely love for Queen and Country. The creature collection is always a treat. Well, mostly a treat. Sometimes you get some losers like Slobber and a Mile Driver. I don't know why. I can't get over that one.
Not a fan.
Can't get over that one.
But we are underway here. Brad Carpenter was on the play. A get to Lava Runner is where he started. Dilks had a tapped Godless Shrine. Here's an attack for 1. Dilks to 19. Will Carpenter light up the stage? What's the follow-up?
Yeah, not really sure. Also, I got another one. Snipcaster Mage.
You're a Snap Crabster Mage. You wish it was that?
Or Snip Crabster Mage.
There's a couple different ways to go there.
Yeah. Caster, Crabster, come on. It was a crab.
And it looks like it was Runaway Steamkin. Tyrant Scorn took care of that from Dilks off a Glacial Fortress, so no damage off of having to remove that. Lava Runner connects for 1 again. Dilks to 18. Now Carpenter's going to light up the stage. Risk Factor and another light up the stage. He's going off.
Yeah, this is for me kind of the reason why I'm not a huge fan of Risk Factor. In specifically in matchups where hitting the battlefield is way more important. He has all this card advantage, but he doesn't really have that good of a board presence. The Tybalt makes a lot of sense, but Risk Factor, like, both of them are going away now, right? Because your mana curve is just a bit high. You hit a bunch of 3s off of your light up the stages. And overall, like, you have to take out a lot of your cheap cards in order to fit these into your deck.
Yeah, so it's just 3 cards that he can only cast till the end of this turn. Pretty unfortunate hits off the light up the stage. Dilks is going to use a Thought Erasure. Carpenter's hand was Rekindling Phoenix, 2 Lava Coils. Phoenix is gone. He's just full of Lava Coils.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, this is not a huge deal. It looks like it's really bad because he's losing 2 Risk Factors, but this costs 1 light up the stage.
True.
2 mana to cast the second light up the stage that was found off the first one. Missing the land so he couldn't, play 2 spells in this turn. A bit unfortunate, but not that huge of a deal. The Tybalt was a pretty good find, though.
Yeah, the choice was to cast Tybalt. Cast that, made a Devil token. Lava Runner connected for 2 because of those 2 light up the stages. Dilks to 16. We go his way. Well, here's a nice one. Oath of Kaya. That'll take care of the Tybalt.
Yeah, definitely don't gain life. Both players recognizing that. The static effect lasts until the end of the resolution of the spell, so no life gain off the Oath of Kaya there, but deals with the Tybalt, which is a pretty big deal. And Carpenter still left with that Devil. Our spotter there looking for the Devil token in the box, I'm sure. That was pretty tough to find.
Yeah, you don't see too many of those. So Carpenter was attacking for 3 there, token plus Lava Runner. Dilks to 13.
Ross Merriam, that is fine.
He's kind of devilish.
There it is.
Here's another Tybalt.
Give me another Ross Merriam. Stat. I'll say this, there's a chance we don't have Devil tokens in the box.
I believe that. But Carpenter will control 2 of those now. He has 2 Lava Coils still in hand, and I believe he picked up another Rekindling Phoenix. Doesn't have a 4th land just yet. Dilks is going to use a Hostage Taker, take and cast the Gitu Lava Runner.
And he has 2 instants in the graveyard, or his sorcerers in the graveyard, so that Lava Runner does have haste. Dilks can attack the Tybalt, but that Devil token from Brad Carpenter's Tybalt can block and trade with the Gitu Lava Runner if he so chooses. I'm curious to see how this turn plays out.
Yeah, so there's an attack. It's going to be at Tybalt. That would prevent another Devil token, so Carpenter's going to oblige and take the trade.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the 2 loyalty represents another Devil anyway, so if you let the Tybalt take damage, you're basically just leaving your opponent with a Gitu Lava Runner on the battlefield.
Carpenter's going to get aggressive. Lava Coil is going to take down the Hostage Taker, an attack for 1 with the Devil, Dilks to 12, another Devil deployed, and he's going to play the Mountain he drew for turn. So 2 cards in hand. Dilks knows about the Coil, does not know about the Phoenix.
Yeah, so this is going to be a spot where Carpenter really needs to peel something like Experimental Frenzy or Chandra to really hammer home. He has a slight advantage on the battlefield, but really low overall in resources, so if Dilks can land something like this Teferi Hero of Dominaria, if this sticks around, it's going to be a real bad time for Carpenter.
He's going to plus it right away. Makes his land draw for turn, and it's going to cast a Duress. He gets to take that Lava Coil, now sees the Rekindling Phoenix, which does not line up great against Teferi.
And no, it does not. I'm actually quite surprised that he chose to Lava Coil the Hostage Taker last turn instead of casting the Phoenix, but I guess he really valued the 2 attack and keeping the Tybalt protected, because obviously if he does attack like something like a minus of a Teferi on the Phoenix means the Tybalt actually gets knocked off, and then you lose that really potent static effect of your opponent can't gain life.
So the 2 Devils knock Teferi down to 3. Carpenter now deploys Rekindling Phoenix, and Dilks is just going to spend the Teferi, put that Rekindling Phoenix 3rd from the top in Carpenter's deck.
Love it.
Ooh, and here's Ugin the Ineffable.
Yeah, and these 2/2s from Ugin are going to line up really well against the Devil tokens from Brad Carpenter. And if he decides to attack or shoot down that card, he's just going to generate extra card advantage from Dilks, since that card does go to Dilks' hand after it dies.
And there you see Ugin the Ineffable. It's plussing, making 2/2 creatures. When that creature dies, the top card of Dilks' deck was exiled. He would put that in his hand. So everyone kind of tracks the card that was exiled. Very similar to Manifest. I think we're using a Manifest overlay here.
we are. It's pretty cool, actually. The Ugin the Ineffable's ability is a lot like a Manifest, but unlike Manifest, if the card dies, it comes back to your hand. So Ugin actually acts as this weird card advantage generator that also affects the battlefield. So not only do you get the card on the battlefield, but if your opponent ever deals with it, you get that card back into your hand.
So Carpenter just had a runaway Steamkin. Dilks is going to start his turn removing that Tybalt. That had to mean life gain was coming, and it's a Basilica Bellhaunt. Dilks to 15.
Yeah, and he's trying to get a little more pressure on the battlefield, gaining a little bit of life. I think I would have liked to just kept seeing tick-ups from Ugin to keep it out of range of dying, just because, the ticking down means that it's very likely to die now in combat.
Yeah, and this attack from 2 Devils, that's likely to do it. They're both coming at the Ugin. That will trigger Oath of Kaya, so Carpenter will lose 2 life. Dilks will gain 2.
Yeah, now this is going to be a really important couple turns for Brad. He really needs to peel Frenzy, Chandra, or perhaps more light up the stages kind of chaining together.
So one of the Devils was blocked by Basilica Bellhaunt, and the other by the Manifest-ish token there. I think it's a spirit. But Ugin got taken down. Carpenter will follow up with the Lightning Strike. That took care of the Bellhaunt. Steamkin now at 2/2. Dilks' turn is just to tap Godless Shrine. Now Carpenter will redraw the Rekindling Phoenix, cast that, attack for 3 with the Steamkin. Dilks will throw the Spirit in the way, put that card into hand.
Yeah, and it's a Vraska's Contempt, so a pretty heads-up block. Now he can use that mana on his instep, take care of the Phoenix permanently, gain some life here, and prevents the 3 damage from the runaway Steamkin. Now he just needs to peel removal spell off the top. It has plenty of mana. See if he can do it to take care of this runaway Steamkin right now.
Yeah, so he's it's like up to 19, draws for turn. It looked like a spell. Didn't catch which one. Just has to pass back.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It looked like a black spell. Could have been another Vraska's Contempt.
Ooh, huge draw for Carpenter. Experimental Frenzy. That puts the Steamkin up to the 3 counters. That's when you can really go off with the red deck. Here's an attack for 4, Dilks to 15. If it was a removal spell, you probably would have seen it here. Carpenter's going to make that 3 mana with the Steamkin. Dilks has a response. It was Moment of Craving. So now the Steamkin is solved. Dilks will gain that 2 life up to 17.
Yeah, and we're going to use a 3 mana here to play Goblin Chainwhirler. So deals temporarily with the creature on the battlefield, but now has to fight through an Experimental Frenzy, which is not an easy thing to do. He's going to need to Mortify pretty quick here.
Yeah, land was the rest of the turn for Carpenter. Dilks just drew a land, played it. The last card in his hand has been a Duress for some time. That's not very effective against Frenzy. Carpenter draws for turn, tapping 4 mana. Second Experimental Frenzy, that's not a big one.
It's a good one, though, because it means that a Mortify is no longer a way for Dilks to get back in the game. He's going to need to find a chain of cards that really starts to dominate the battlefield, or hit runner ways to kill Frenzy, and then deal with all the extra cards that the Frenzies have left behind.
Yeah, that is definitely true. Carpenter found a Lightning Strike. There was an attack for 3 with the Chain Whirler. I believe Dilks should have fallen to 10 off of that, but this Bell Haunt will correct that back to 13. Carpenter discards his card in hand he didn't really care about.
Yeah, once the Frenzy's on the battlefield, the discard effects no longer have any real value. So,
all right, back Carpenter's way. He drew. He'll start his turn with Light Up the Stage off the top. You can still cast these cards from exile. It's a Mountain and a Get to Lava Runner. Yep. Goes back to checking for the Frenzy.
You always want to play the land off the top as opposed to the one from the Light Up the Stage when you already have a Frenzy on the battlefield, because that allows you to basically effectively reset the top of your deck.
Here's another big 4, Chandra Fire Artisans joining the party. This also has some cool synergy with Experimental Frenzy. You can reset your deck if you get an extra land on top.
Right. They don't necessarily work that well together. It's kind of overkill because the Frenzy basically does what the +1 of Chandra does at all times. But yeah, being able to reset a land sometimes is pretty huge. And if Dilks ever deals with the Frenzies, you still want that big 4-mana permanent lying around.
So Carpenter casts the Lava Runner off to Light Up the Stage. Pass back Dilks' way. He'll draw for turn.
There it is. That's the one.
Thought Erasure. He gets to Surveil. Gets the information that Carpenter bordered in Direfleet Daredevil, I suppose.
Yep. And this is exactly what I was talking about. Brad had like 1 or 2 turns to draw one of those big permanents, found the Experimental Frenzy, and now he's just absolutely dominating Dilks. This game is effectively over. I cannot imagine a string of cards that gets Dilks out of it, because even if he does find answer all in a row, he still has to deal with all the cards left behind by these powerful 4-mana permanents. It's just a losing proposition. There's not one Magic card that does it.
Right. It's not even clear that Dilks even gets another turn at this point. There's so much mana.
That's
Carpenter
true.
starts his turn with the Lava Coil. He already has 5 power of creatures he can attack with.
Whoop. That's a Lightning Strike. Dilks down to 10. There's 5 power in the battlefield. Can he find 5 more points this turn?
Looks like there's another spell. 2 mana tapped. Pyromancer, that's 2 more points. Dilks to 8.
Yep, 3 more points. Needs another Lightning Strike or a Wizard's Lightning to close the deal. Finds a land. Has a reset here with a Chandra still, I believe.
Yep, has not used the Chandra just yet. There's another spell. He's tapping that land he played. Light Up the Stage. Few more looks for that Lightning Strike.
Yep, Lightning Strike, Wizard's Lightning will get the job done. Pair of Shocks will get the job done. I doubt that the Shocks are still in the deck anymore, though. That's my worry.
Though Carpenter does not need to win this turn by any means.
Right. This is just closing the deal before your opponent has any real shot to potentially get out of it. But I'm pretty sure this game is over.
So Chandra plus Light Up the Stage. We see a Goblin Chain Whirler, a Runaway Steamkin, and a Mountain all off in exile. Carpenter will now attack for 5. Dilks down to 3.
And he's going to use his last 2 mana to play the Runaway Steamkin off of the Light Up the Stage. But everything else will go away.
This back for Dilks. One last draw step. I don't know if he has anything, but the draw was Hostage Taker. He's going to take the Goblin Chain Whirler. That can answer some of these creatures. He casts that. It's going to take down the Steamkin and the Pyromancer. Does 1 damage to the Chandra, which Carpenter gets to bounce back, do 1 damage to Dilks.
Yeah, that was a really good draw from Dilks. He set it up with the Surveil from the Thought Erasure, though. But I don't think it's going to be enough, not by a long shot.
Yeah, Carpenter still has these Frenzies, this Chandra. He'll draw for turn, start looking at the top card of the deck. Just needs to find 2 more points now. Dilks is at 2.
Yep, looks like another Tybalt, Rakish Instigator. That's 3 of those now, and these Devils are looking quite menacing.
Devils tend to ultimately result in at least 1 point of damage.
Right.
So that's half of the game.
And with Tybalt's static effect, not being able to gain any life.
Yeah, makes it really difficult to claw out of this position.
Yep. All right, so we reset the top of the deck and played a land with the Chandra. So if it lands on top, Brad's stuck. Let's see what he's got.
Direfleet Daredevil.
That's a good one. He can use the Tyrant Scorn actually to bounce the Goblin Chain Whirler and cast it, putting Dilks to 1.
Well, he couldn't bounce it and cast it because of the Frenzy.
Oh, sure.
It is a nice removal spell, though.
Sure, so he can use the removal spell to just kill or bounce. But I think bouncing is fine, but killing is basically the same thing. It's just stuck in your hand. There's no way he's going to pop off those 2 Frenzies anytime soon.
Another look at the top of the deck. A tap of 1 mana. Lava Runner. That's enough creatures.
Yep.
That'll be lethal. Dilks is going to pack them up. The game is now all tied up. We're going to a game 3.
Yeah, and I expect Carpenter to go back to the drawing board here after sideboard. And he had a spot to cast Risk Factor early on, chose not to, instead choosing to cast a Tybalt Rage Instigator instead. And this matchup is all about getting a foothold on the battlefield, where Risk Factor is all about trying to burn your opponent out. And if you're seeing Oath of Kaya, Moment of Craving, Vraska's Contempt, burn spells no longer become that important. And it's one of the reasons why I've actually cut Risk Factor from my red decks pretty recently, because in the matchups that it should traditionally be good against, these like Esper decks with a bunch of removal, it's not that good against, because you just need to grind them out with your Experimental Frenzies and your Chandras, and stuff like Risk Factor is just not where you want to be at. And almost every turn of that game, until Carpenter got Experimental Frenzy on the battlefield and gained an overwhelming advantage, Risk Factor was a literal dead draw.
Yeah, and we saw every single card in his sideboard be a factor in that game there.
Right.
So really heavy sideboarding here. You're thinking maybe Risk Factors go out, something back from the main deck comes in. We'll see exactly what it is.
Here's the thing. Any matchup where you're bringing in Lava Coil, you should not bring in Risk Factor.
Sure.
Those are just, they
achieve different ends.
Fundamentally at odds with each other.
Yes. But if you're watching us right now, presumably you enjoy watching live Magic. If you enjoy watching live Magic, we have a ton of it here on this very channel, twitch.tv/SCG2, where every Tuesday and Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, my best friend Todd Anderson,
yes,
playing some Versus Live.
Wait, I thought Brad Carpenter was your best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You get it.
Yeah, so the Versus Live is actually my show I do alongside Ross Merriam, who is at this tournament and 3-0 with Is It Phoenix and doing quite well so far. He's also our time shifted match, so we're going to get to see that after this match concludes. We do that every Tuesday and Thursday, 1 p.m., and we just either play decks that we've brewed up ourselves whenever it's time for a new set to come out, or it's decks that have been doing really well over the past couple of weeks, and we do all sorts of formats, standard, modern, sometimes legacy when we have a tournament coming up. We do gauntlets where we run one deck against the field to try to see if it's good. A lot of stuff going on Versus Live, so make sure to check that out. It's on this channel. So if you just hit that follow button, you'll see it on Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m.
Yeah, so we're underway for Game 3 here. Matt Dilks was on the play. Hallowed Fountain into Swamp, into Thought Erasure for him. Just a mountain for Brad Carpenter. We'll look at the hand. 2 more mountains. A Tybalt, a Lava Coil, a Frenzy, a Lightning Strike, and a Light Up the Stage. A lot of diversity in this hand. Yeah,
this is a pretty weird hand from Brad because he doesn't have 1 or 2 drop creature, which you usually want to just try to get a foothold on the battlefield. But it has a lot of cards that are great going long. Tybalt, Experimental Frenzy, and a couple of removal spells to check stuff like Thief of Sanity or Hero Precinct 1.
Dilks is going to take care of the Frenzy, keeps his card on top with the Surveil. Just a mountain and a pass for Carpenter. None of that stuff really looked particularly castable when we saw the hand. Turn 3 for Dilks, tap Watery Grave. Yep. Now Carpenter plays third land. He's going to put Tybalt on the stack. That'll resolve. It'll make a Devil.
A great spot to cast the Tybalt. Dilks probably with a handful, just reactive removal, establishes a Planeswalker with a really good static effect against a number of cards from Dilks, and generates some pressure in the form of 2 Devils over the course of 2 turns.
So we'll see what Dilks can do about it. Here's Oath of Kaya. That'll clean up the Tybalt. Once again, we'll see that not gain life, but at least takes care of that static effect.
That's twice that's come up now, and that's pretty important because Kaya, Oath of Kaya is trading effectively 1-for-1 with the Tybalt, but not gaining any life, and Carpenter is still still left with a devil each time. And as you're playing these cards that generate virtual card advantage like Tybalt, that's exactly where you want to be. Trading one for one and leaving yourself with something afterwards.
So the devil does connect. Dilks to 19. Carpenter will cast that light up the stage. Finds another light up the stage as well as a mountain. He has not yet played a land this turn.
This is a pretty weird spot you get into sometimes with mono red, where you have a chance to play second light up the stage on the turn where you cast the first one, or you can wait a cycle and try to get in a chip damage and do it next turn. I like waiting because that gives Carpenter effectively 2 turns to start casting some of those 4 drops that he might hit off of the light up the stage. And as your mana base gets, as your spell base gets a little deeper when you bring in Phoenix, more frenzies, etc., it's way more important that you're able to cast all the spells off of light up the stage. So being patient is really important.
And you see Carpenter execute that patience, going to leave that light up the stage in exile, go back to Matt Dilks. He's going to start his turn with a duress, get another look at that hand. He still knows about a lava coil and a lightning strike. We'll see what was picked up. Looks like Rekindling Phoenix, an additional lava coil, and a risk factor.
Yeah, the duress, I'm not really sure what Dilks wants to go after. Maybe the risk factor in this particular spot if he doesn't have a way to establish a battlefield this turn, because the game is going to go quite long. Obviously, the Phoenix might be problematic, but duress only takes non-creature spells. The 2 lava coils are relatively redundant, and the lightning strike is the only one that can go at the face. Decides to take the lightning strike, which kind of is bridging the gap for the most part.
Here's a scary follow-up. He'll shock for a Guileless Shrine to 17. It's going to be Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord.
Okay.
Willing to shock for it. He'll gain one of those life back, plussing the Sorin up to 17, Carpenter to 19.
Yeah, so here I expect Carpenter to risk factor EOT. Dilks is probably going to tank it down to 13.
Yeah, and you're seeing exactly that. So go back Carpenter's way.
Now, Carpenter probably going to attack Dilks directly with that Rosmarum token so he can cast that light up the stage. He's going to try to hit a land so that he can cast the Rekindling Phoenix and continue to establish a board presence.
So that is where you see the attack. Here is the light up the stage. 2 mountains, not very exciting. He'll play 1. Does still get to play the other one next turn.
Yep. And this is going to get checked pretty easily by Vraska's Contempt from Dilks, but, you know, Carpenter's not under much duress. The tick-ups from Sorin are a little annoying, but without a creature to potentially return, there's no agency. There's no real threat to basically just taking this kind of long roundabout. It effectively invalidates some of your burn spells, but with 2 lava coils, I don't see Sorin being that big of a deal, and I would not be surprised to see Carpenter effectively ignore it for the rest of the game.
Dilks will gain some life. Vraska's Contempt on the Phoenix, plus on the Sorin. Able to keep his life pretty high, just facing down that 1 devil. He's at 16. Carpenter plays that other land up to light up the stage. We know that his hand has 2 lava coils here. He's got that risk factor in the graveyard.
Yeah, but not a lot else. Probably going to be pitching one of the lands to the risk factor soon, but as you can see, risk factor is just going to do a chunk of damage to Dilks, but a lot of his cards gain life, and it doesn't really give Carpenter much juice. He's still got 2 lava coils in hand. Dilks has a constant source of life gain. Brad Carpenter could basically never attack the Sorin, because if he does, that's 2 more life that Dilks is going to gain from the Oath of Kaya.
Yeah, that trigger definitely adds up. Play for Carpenter is get to Lava Runner. That has haste. Lava Runner plus Devil are attacking. Carpenter gave it some pause where he wanted to aim them. It looks like they're going upstairs at Dilks. He'll fall to 13. We'll go back his way.
It's going to take a lot of attacks and a lot of triggers of Oath of Kaya in order to take down the Sorin, so might as well ignore it. Just let him have that gain 1 life every turn and deal me a damage every turn, you know.
Turn for Dilks. It was duress. Takes one of those lava coils, sees a mountain. Oath of Kaya as a follow-up. They'll take down the Lava Runner. Dilks back to 16, plus on the Sorin up to 17.
Yeah, and again, risk factor, he's just going to tank it again. Doesn't want to give Carpenter any cards. Carpenter is going to 100% need to draw something like Frenzy or Chandra to get back in this game. You know, it's also possible he could get back in with just a Rekindling Phoenix, since Phoenix is a little bit harder to deal with, and Dilks has already used at least 1 Vraska's Contempt so far.
Yeah, you figure he's going to need something that costs 4, though. He needs 1 of his high-impact cards pretty quick.
Yeah. Luckily, the Devil token is going to keep chipping him away and kind of invalidate the plus from Sorin, but he's just basically left with no relevant cards in hand or graveyard at this point.
Draw for Dilks was Thought Erasure, takes care of that other Lava Coil, sees Carpenter just had a mountain in hand. Draw for Carpenter, Goblin Chain Whirler. This one's actually pretty high impact here, reasonable body there.
Yeah, and Dilks is going to need a string of spells off the top in order to really solidify his advantage. Again, there's no real threats on Matthew Dilks' side that are going to go to the graveyard, so the Sorin can be 100 loyalty for all Brad Carpenter cares. It's literally just going to sit and play for the rest of the game, and there's nothing that he can really do about it. But, as long as Dilks doesn't draw a creature, that's not a huge deal. It's literally just ping you once every turn, and I'll gain 1 life every turn, and that's it.
Yeah, right now we're just trading Sorin activation with attack for whatever Carpenter has. Life totals after that swing, Dilks down to 8, Carpenter at 15. Follow up is Runaway Steamkin. It's another body. Ooh, pretty good turn for Dilks, though.
Yeah, that's
Here's
great.
Hero, Precinct 1 into Basilica Bellhound. Gain 3 life up to 11, make it 1-1. A lot of blockers now. Sorin up once again. Dilks will be up to 12 there. Carpenter to 14.
Yeah, this is pretty great for Dilks, drawing the Hero Precinct 1 last turn. Chose not to cast it until he found a multicolor spell. Found that multicolor spell, and now has a pretty sizable defense. And Brad Carpenter basically can't attack because of the 3/4 body of Bellhaunt.
Yeah, and his draw was just a mountain. He plays that and passes. As you said, no good attacks. We go back to Dilks. It's going to plus that Sorin once again.
Yeah, I actually like attacking with the Basilica Bellhaunt in this spot. If Carpenter wants to trade, that's more than fine, because then you just start minusing the Sorin. You get extra life points off of the Basilica Bellhaunt's ability. If he doesn't, that's fine. There's no way Carpenter's going to start attacking the Sorin now. It has more loyalty than Matthew Dilks has life points.
Yeah, it's extremely loyal. It's ticking up to 18 here. Carpenter has another Steamkin. First one's a 2/2 now.
More
Dilks
blood
just draws.
for the Blood God.
Ooh, something for 4.
There it
Experimental
is.
Frenzy with double Steamkin on the table. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to be the test. If Carpenter can hit a string of cards off the top, he might be able to clear off that Basilica Bellhaunt. And then Dilks is going to have to start basically minusing the Sorin every turn instead of ticking up. And eventually, Brad Carpenter might just grind through 10 or so Basilica Bellhaunts.
Yeah. Attack with the Devil. That gets blocked. 1 point upstairs. Dilks to 13.
Yeah, and that Frenzy is super scary because of those 2 Runaway Steamkins currently on the battlefield.
And here's a light up the stage. One of those Steamkins up to a 4/4, the other to a 3/3. We could see Carpenter cast a lot of spells this turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And with a Frenzy active, 2 Steamkins active, and casting light up the stage here with Spectacle, he's going to have access to a lot of mana potentially. And if he just hits a string of spells, he's in good shape. And he has a bunch of lands already on the battlefield. Looks like 8 already. And I know he's discarded at least 1 to risk factor, so maybe 9.
Dilks had 1 card in hand. It's a Vraska's Contempt, so he's going to respond to those triggers off the light up the stage, get the big Steamkin before it gets up to the 3rd counter.
Right. And that's relatively important here. And now let's just make sure Brad Carpenter resolves that last Steamkin. Oh, he might miss it. Oh, it's missed.
Uh-oh.
That's a T.
Experimental Frenzy. Yoshino Pyromancer were the hits. Now Carpenter sees, oh, I have this crummy little Steamkin. But he had physically announced the trigger, so they do end up resolving it.
This is a spot where I think if Dilks wanted to fight it, he could, but Dilks obviously just like, it's okay. A little bit of miscommunication, and obviously I stopped you mid-resolution, so no harm, no foul in my opinion.
Yeah, Carpenter is tapping for something. Looks like it's the card on the top of the deck. It's a risk factor. That's going to get this Steamkin up to that 3rd counter.
Yeah, and here, you're seeing another reason why I'm not a huge fan of risk factor in this matchup. Now, with an Experimental Frenzy on the battlefield, Dilks can just say, okay, have all your cards, that's fine. You already have this giant card advantage engine. Why? Just have the 3.
Yeah, and that is what you will see him do. Eventually, though, Carpenter can just sacrifice the Frenzy. This game is going to go pretty long.
I mean, that is certainly true, but
it's not immediately powerful, is your point.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
All right, so we have 1 mana floating, and that's going to cast a Lava Coil, leaving him 1 floating. That gets rid of the Bellhop permanently, notably. Can't get back something from exile with Sorin.
Yeah, that is really important. Remember, the -X on Sorin is to recur a creature from your graveyard. That exile is huge. So the Steamkin now at 2/2. Carpenter's going to pass back, but if Dilks does not find an answer to that Frenzy, Carpenter could have a huge turn on his next one.
Yeah, I mean, even if he bricks, he still has the ability to cast Vaishno Pyromancer. He has multiple cards in hand that he drew off the risk factor, so he can just cast another risk factor if he wants from the graveyard. You know, and at any point, if you so choose, he can pop off the Frenzy and start casting spells from hand.
Reasonable draw for Dilks is Basilica Bellhound. He still has that Hero Precinct 1. Pick up another token, gain some life. Have Carpenter discard a Lightning Strike from hand for whatever that's worth. He is still under the Frenzy, though.
Yeah, this is not looking good for Dilks, but he's putting up a good fight. I mean, you can see just like how Lava Coil interacts poorly for the Sorin players, you know? Like in this spot, you feel like, okay, Dilks has gained, what, roughly 20 life this game, maybe more. I mean, however many Sorin tick-ups, let's see, he's at 20?
Yeah, 20 loyalty
Which
Sorin.
means he's ticked up 8 times, so Sorin alone has gained at least 8 life.
Couple Bellhounds, Vraska's Contempt.
Yeah, you know. And that, again, and I don't want to keep harping on it because it's not that big of a deal. But this is why, specifically, I don't like risk factor in this matchup.
Play for Carpenter. Darkfleet Daredevil is going to grab Vraska's Contempt. Now he's just going to take care of the Sorin outright. Carpenter will go to 13 off of that. Dilks is at 19 after that last Sorin activation, but won't see any more of those.
All right, we're going to cast the Vaishno Pyromancer from the live the stage from last turn. That's going to put another counter on the Runaway Seamkin, putting it up to 3. And now Carpenter actually has the ability here to cast another spell off the top if he has it. And it looks like it's probably a Goblin Chain Whirler, the way that this attack is lining up.
Yeah, 3/3 first striker attacking into a Basilica Bellhound on blocks. That certainly tells you something's going on.
Would not be surprised to see Dilks chump block with the token, but also if it is a Chain Whirler, I think he's going to end up losing the game anyway. But it looks like it's just a normal burn spell, so this is a fine scenario for Dilks. It's still not great, obviously, but it's not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah, so Lightning Strike did take it down. The Chain Whirler will stick around. That was cast off of the Steamkin, which is now back up to 1 counter. We go back to Matthew Dilks, draw and a pass.
Yeah, and this looks all but wrapped up in favor of Bradley Carpenter, so it's just going to take like a little bit of time to close it out, but I think that he's in a really good spot here.
Draws for turn, takes a look at the Frenzy, thinking about lining up some attacks. He'll cast a spell. It's a light up the stage. Steamkin up to 2 counters. Light of the stage will resolve. Carpenter with it on the stack actually going to look at that top card, but now it resolves. Goblin Chain Whirler the first card. Tybalt the second. Goblin Chain Whirler, it's going to be cast. That'll clean up those hero tokens. Dilks to 16. Steamkin now up to 3 counters again. And this engine is just so powerful.
I mean, that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why the red deck is so good right now in Standard, because the cards just all really work well together. You have a great early game with a bunch of cheap creatures. You have some reach with burn spells, so even if your opponent has a couple removal spells, they need to have ways to create footholds on the battlefield. And if they don't, eventually you're just going to burn them out. And here we're seeing the true top end of the deck coming into play and that Experimental Frenzy, and if your opponent doesn't have the answer for it, it is going to dominate. Both games 2 and 3 completely dominated by Experimental Frenzy.
Big attack, 11 points coming in. Dilks to 5, follow up for Carpenter. Use that Steamkin, cast that Tybalt up light of the stage. Steamkin back to 1 counter, makes a Devil token. Dilks cannot gain life as long as that Tybalt's on the table. And Carpenter will pass back.
Well, Teferi here of Dominaria, a bit too late. As a time traveler, he should have showed up sooner.
Should have aimed for the head.
Well,
I don't know why I said that.
I don't know.
This game looks pretty well wrapped up for Brad Carpenter, though, who has been aiming for the head a lot. A lot of burn spells going upstairs.
I'm trying to think of a card that gets Dilks out of it. Cry of the Carnarium would potentially give him 1 turn. He would go down to effectively 1 life, or sorry, 2 life from the attack from the Goblin Chain Whirler. He has the land in hand, but I'm pretty sure he's just dead.
Plus on Teferi, Dilks is just going to do some combat math. Carpenter has got it all rolled up. Dilks will concede, and Brad Carpenter, 2-1 your winner here over Matthew Dilks, advancing to 4-0 with mono red aggro.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I'm a huge proponent of playing max frenzies right now. I said in an article a few weeks ago that I thought Chandra was great, right? Because everyone was playing Mortify. So, the more Mortifies that are in the format, the worse Frenzy is going to be when you can supplant it with something pretty similar, at the top end of your red curve. And Chandra was the perfect foil to that week 1 metagame. Now you're seeing these Esper Hero decks kind of cut back on Mortify because there's not a lot of Wilderness Reclamation running around, and there's not a lot of Experimental Frenzy running around. And at 3 mana for a kill spell, it's a little inefficient. Even though it's multicolor for Hero Precinct 1, it's just not that good. And